The music stopped right in the middle of the ceremony. The priest froze, and every guest turned their head toward the altar. My groom took a step back, his hands shaking. Then he looked straight at my father and said in a trembling voice, "I can't marry your daughter, Mr. Hayes. Not after what I found out." The room went completely silent. My heart dropped. My father's smile disappeared, and I stood there confused, still holding my bouquet, wondering what he was talking about. Then my groom turned to me, tears forming in his eyes, and said something that made everyone gasp. "Your father has been hiding something from you, something that changes everything. If you want to know the truth that broke my family and my heart in one single moment, stay until the end." And before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Lena Hayes, and my wedding day was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The sun was shining, the lake behind the venue sparkled like glass, and everything was perfect. The kind of perfect I had dreamed about since I was a little girl. The church was filled with family, friends, and people from our small town. My father, Richard Hayes, walked proudly beside me, his hand holding mine tightly as we moved down the aisle. For as long as I can remember, he's been my rock, strong, calm, and protective. He raised me on his own after my mother passed away in a car accident when I was 8. To me, my father was everything. My parent, my guide, my best friend. At the altar stood Noah Brooks, the man I had loved for 3 years. He was thoughtful, honest, and patient, the kind of man you can't help but trust. He worked as an architect and always talked about building our dream house someday. I still remember how he used to tell me, "When I look at you, Lena, everything feels right." Our families had met many times, and though Noah's mother, Helen, was kind, she always seemed nervous around my father. I assumed it was just her shy nature, but looking back now, I realize she wasn't shy. She was hiding something. The day started beautifully. The guests laughed as my bridesmaids fixed my veil, and I could hear my father chatting proudly about me with old friends. When it was time to walk down the aisle, he looked at me with eyes full of pride. "You look just like your mother," he said softly. As I walked toward Noah, my heart raced with excitement. Everything felt like a dream. The priest began the ceremony, and I couldn't stop smiling. I looked at Noah and saw the same happiness in his eyes, or at least I thought I did. Then I noticed something strange. Noah's mother, sitting in the front row, looked pale. Her hands were trembling as she clutched her purse tightly against her lap. I tried to ignore it, thinking she was just emotional, but something about her eyes unsettled me. She kept glancing at my father, and he refused to look back. Still, I didn't think much of it. My focus was on Noah and the words we were about to say. But when the priest turned to Noah and asked him to repeat his vows, everything changed. Noah's lips parted, but no words came out. He took a long breath, his eyes darting between me and my father. My father frowned slightly, whispering, "Go on, son." Noah shook his head slowly. "I can't," he whispered. The room went still. The priest looked confused, and the guests shifted in their seats. Then, Noah stepped away from me, his expression torn between guilt and heartbreak. He turned to my father and said, "I can't marry her, Mr. Hayes, not after what I discovered." Gasps echoed through the church. I froze, gripping my bouquet, staring at the man I loved, waiting for him to say it was some mistake. But he didn't. He looked broken. My father stood tall, his voice stern. "Noah, what are you talking about?" Noah's voice cracked as he said, "About the truth, about who you really are." The crowd fell completely silent. My stomach tightened and my hands began to shake. I looked at my father's face. His calm expression was gone. He looked terrified. And that's when I knew something was terribly wrong. For a moment, no one moved. My father's face turned pale, and the priest quietly stepped back, unsure what to do. My heart was pounding so hard that I could barely hear anything else. Noah's words hung in the air like a storm waiting to strike. I looked at him, confused and terrified. "What are you talking about?" I asked. Noah's voice shook as he said, "Lena, I didn't want to ruin this day, but your father has been lying to you and to me." My father stepped forward sharply. That's enough, he said. Whatever this is, it can wait until after the ceremony. But Noah shook his head. No, it can't. Not when it changes everything about who we are. The guests began whispering, their voices blending into a soft hum of confusion. My hands started trembling, and the bouquet slipped slightly from my grip. My father's eyes hardened, and I could see the fear behind them, fear I had never seen before. Noah looked straight at me. I found something a few weeks ago while helping my mom clean out her attic. Old papers, photos, and a marriage certificate. I didn't think much of it until I saw your father's name, Richard Hayes. My knees went weak. What do you mean? He swallowed hard. My mom was married to your father years ago. He left her before I was born. She never told me his name. I only found out after seeing the papers. Gasps echoed through the church. My father's expression froze, his jaw tightening. That's not true, he said quickly. This is nonsense. Noah's mother, sitting in the front row, stood up, her face pale as she gripped the pew for balance. It is true, she said softly. Richard, you left me. I tried to reach you when Noah was born, but you ignored every letter. I raised him alone. My father's eyes darkened. Helen, stop this. But she didn't. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she continued. You moved to another state, changed your name, and built a new life like we never existed. I never wanted my son to find out, but he deserves the truth, and so does your daughter. The room erupted into shocked whispers again. I felt dizzy. So you're saying my dad was married to your mom? Noah nodded slowly, his eyes filled with guilt. Yes, which means you and I stumbled back a step, shaking my head. No, that can't be true. My father rushed forward. Lena, listen to me. I didn't know Helen had the baby. She left before I could find her. I thought she disappeared. Helen's voice broke. That's not true. I called your office, wrote letters. You didn't want me or our child. Noah clenched his fists. You left us, and then you raised another daughter like nothing happened. The guests were now standing, murmuring, some covering their mouths in disbelief. My mind was spinning. The man I loved, the man I was about to marry, was my half-brother. Tears welled in my eyes as I turned to my father. You told me Mom was your only love, I whispered. You told me our family had no secrets. He looked desperate. I did what I had to do, Lena. I was young, scared, and foolish. I never meant for you to get hurt. Noah's voice was cold. You didn't just hurt her. You hurt both of us. We grew up thinking we were strangers only to find out we share blood. I dropped my bouquet to the floor. This can't be real, I said. Tell me this isn't true. Helen wiped her tears. I wish it wasn't. But the proof is in that marriage certificate. I brought it with me today, just in case he tried to deny it. She reached into her purse and held up a folded document. The priest took it, glanced at it, and his face turned grim. This says Richard Hayes was married to Helen Brooks 29 years ago, he confirmed quietly. The church went silent again. Every sound, every breath seemed to disappear. I turned to my father, my voice trembling. Why didn't you ever tell me? He looked at me helplessly. Because I didn't want to lose you. I didn't know how to explain my past without destroying everything we had. I thought it was buried. Noah's voice cracked. Buried doesn't mean gone. I took a step back, tears streaming down my face. The man who had raised me on lessons about honesty and love had lied about the biggest truth of all. And the man I was supposed to spend my life with was now my own brother. I looked at Noah, my chest aching. You should have told me the moment you found out. He lowered his head. I wanted to, but I kept hoping I was wrong. I prayed it wasn't true. I turned to my father one last time. You ruined everything, I said quietly. You didn't. Just lie. You destroyed every good thing I believed in. My father tried to reach for me, but I stepped back. Don't touch me. The priest gently placed his hand on my shoulder. Lena, maybe we should all take a moment to step outside. I shook my head. There's nothing left to say. Without another word, I pulled off my ring and placed it on the altar. The crowd watched in stunned silence as I walked down the aisle, my heart breaking with every step. Behind me, I could hear Noah calling my name, but I didn't look back. The truth had just rewritten my entire life, and I didn't even know who I was anymore. I walked out of the church, the heavy wooden doors closing behind me with a sound that felt final, like an ending. The bright afternoon light hit my face, but it didn't feel warm anymore. I could still hear the muffled voices of guests inside, shock, pity, confusion, all blurring together into white noise. My dress dragged along the steps, catching on the stone, but I didn't care. The only thing I could feel was betrayal. My father, the man I trusted the most, had hidden a truth so deep and painful that it shattered everything I thought I knew about myself, my family, and the man I loved. Noah followed me out a moment later. His voice was quiet, careful, as if he was afraid of breaking what was left of me. "Lena, please wait," he said. I turned, my eyes filled with tears. Wait for what? To hear more lies? To find out what else I don't know? He shook his head. No, I need you to know that I didn't want it to happen like this. I wanted to protect you from this pain. Protect me, I said bitterly. You dropped this truth in front of everyone I know. You didn't protect me, Noah. You humiliated me. His face twisted in guilt. I didn't know what else to do. When I confronted my mom about it, she told me the truth only a few days ago. I thought about staying quiet, but I couldn't marry you knowing we share blood. I thought being honest was the least I could do. I wanted to scream, to hit something, to disappear. Instead, I just whispered, "Honesty doesn't fix what's already broken." I walked toward the lake behind the church. The air was cool, the water still. My reflection stared back at me, a bride without a wedding, a daughter without trust, a woman who suddenly didn't know where she belonged. I sat down on a bench, holding my face in my hands, trying to stop the shaking. After a few minutes, I heard footsteps. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. My father sat quietly beside me, his shadow falling across the grass. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he said softly, "I know you hate me right now." I didn't look at him. "You think hate even covers what I'm feeling? You lied to me about everything." He nodded slowly, his voice calm but filled with regret. "You're right. I lied because I was ashamed. I was young when I met Helen. I made mistakes, selfish ones. When she got pregnant, my family threatened to cut me off if I didn't end things. I convinced myself I was doing the right thing, that I'd build a better life and maybe someday make up for it. But that day never came." I turned toward him, tears burning my eyes. "You didn't just ruin her life. You ruined mine. You let me fall in love with my own brother." His face crumpled in pain. "I never wanted that to happen, Lena. I didn't know Noah existed until today." I shook my head. "That doesn't make it better. You hid your past, and now it's destroyed everything." He reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away. "You taught me to value truth. You told me lies were poison. And yet, you've been feeding me poison my whole life." For the first time, my father's composure broke. His voice cracked as he said, "I lost your mother, and I was terrified of losing you too. So I buried my shame. I thought if I never spoke about it, it would stay in the past. But the past has a cruel way of finding us, doesn't it?" I didn't answer. My chest felt hollow. Noah stood a few feet away, watching us silently. He looked torn between wanting to help and knowing he didn't belong here anymore. His mother, Helen, had come out of the church too. She walked slowly toward us, her face streaked with tears. "Lena," she said gently, "I know this is unbearable. I never meant to hurt you. I never meant for any of this to happen." I looked at her, my voice shaking. "You didn't. He did." She nodded sadly. "Yes, but I let the secret stay hidden. I should have told my son sooner. I thought silence would protect him, but it only created more pain." We all stood there by the lake, 4 lives tangled by a truth that had been buried for decades. Noah finally spoke. "We can't change what happened, but we can decide what comes next." I looked at him, my heart aching. What's next? We can't be together. We can't just forget this. He nodded. "I know. I don't expect us to, but I need you to know that what we felt wasn't wrong. It was real. We just didn't know the truth." His words cut deep because they were true. Our love had been real, but it could never exist again. It wasn't our fault, but that didn't make the pain any easier to bear. I stood up, wiping my tears. "I can't stay here," I said quietly. "I need to leave. I need to find a way to live without this hanging over me." My father looked at me, his eyes full of regret. "Where will you go?" "Anywhere that isn't here," I said. "Someplace where I don't have to be your daughter or his almost bride. I just want to be me again." As I walked away, I could hear my father crying softly behind me. For the first time in my life, he wasn't the strong, untouchable man I had always seen. He was just a human being who had finally been forced to face his sins. That was the moment I decided something important. I couldn't erase the past, but I could choose not to be defined by it. The truth had broken me, but it would also be the thing that set me free. The days after the wedding felt unreal. The decorations were still hanging in the church hall, untouched and forgotten, as if the celebration had simply frozen in time. My dress was still draped over the chair where I'd left it, its white fabric now wrinkled and dull. The house was quiet, heavy with silence, and my father hadn't spoken much since that day. He stayed in his study most of the time, avoiding both my eyes and his reflection in the mirror. I hadn't seen Noah or Helen since the ceremony, and part of me hoped I never would. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still hear Noah's voice saying, "I can't marry her." A week later, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from Helen. She wanted to meet, not to explain, she said, but to help me find closure. I didn't know if I had the strength to face her, but a small part of me needed answers. I needed to know how everything had gone so wrong. So, I went. She lived just outside of town, in a small house surrounded by a garden full of wildflowers. When she opened the door, she looked older than I remembered, her eyes tired but kind. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. I nodded, stepping inside. "I don't know if I'm ready to forgive anyone," I said. Helen sighed. "I don't expect forgiveness. I only want you to know the truth that your father couldn't tell you." We sat down at her kitchen table. On it lay a small wooden box. She opened it, revealing faded photographs, old letters, and a gold wedding ring. "Your father and I were young," she began. "We fell in love fast, too fast. His family didn't approve of me. They wanted him to marry someone from a wealthy background. When I got pregnant, his parents threatened to disown him. They told him he'd lose everything if he stayed with me." She paused, her hands trembling slightly. "I thought love would be enough to keep us together, but he chose security over us. One night, he packed his things and left. I was heartbroken. I tried to contact him after Noah was born, but his number was disconnected. Letters went unanswered. I eventually heard he had moved to another state and started a new life. I felt my throat tighten. "So, he knew you were pregnant?" "Yes," she said. "He knew. I begged him to stay, but he said he couldn't handle the pressure. I thought if I disappeared, he'd come looking for us. But he never did. So I raised Noah alone. I told him his father was gone, because in a way, he was." I sat there, staring at the photographs. One of them showed my father, much younger, holding Helen's hand. He looked carefree, like a different man. The weight of it all hit me hard. The man who had taught me to live with honesty had built his life on a foundation of lies. Helen reached across the table and touched my hand, gently. "You and Noah didn't do anything wrong," she said. "You fell in love without knowing the truth. That love was pure, even if it can't exist anymore." Tears blurred my vision. "It doesn't make it hurt any less," I whispered. "I know," she said softly. "But the pain means you still have a heart strong enough to care. That's how you'll heal." When I returned home that evening, my father was sitting on the porch, a photograph of my mother in his hands. He looked up when he saw me. "Did you go see her?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said. "She told me everything." He nodded, his voice trembling. "Then you know I was a coward." I didn't respond right away. I stood beside him, looking out at the setting sun. "Why didn't you tell me, Dad?" His eyes filled with tears. "Because I thought if I buried my past deep enough, it would stay there. But the past doesn't stay buried. It waits. And when it finally comes for you, it takes everything." For the first time, I saw not the strong, unshakable man I'd grown up with, but a broken human being who had spent his life running from his mistakes. He reached for my hand. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, But I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. Every good thing I did in my life, I did because I wanted to make up for the man I used to be. I pulled my hand away gently. Love isn't about hiding the truth, Dad. It's about trusting someone enough to share it. You took that away from me. His face fell, but he nodded. You're right. That night, I packed a small bag and left. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed distance. From him, from the town, from everything. As I drove away, I passed by the lake where Noah and I had once talked about our future. I parked the car and got out. The water was calm, the sky painted in shades of pink and gold. I stood there for a long time, letting the wind wash over me, letting the tears fall freely for the first time since that day. It was strange, but standing there, I felt something shift inside me. The pain was still there, but beneath it was something new. A quiet strength, a determination to rebuild myself from the ashes of everything I'd lost. That was the moment I realized I wasn't defined by my father's choices or by a love that couldn't last. I was defined by what I did next, by the courage to face the truth and start again. When I finally got back in the car and drove away, I didn't look back. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it belonged entirely to me. It took me months to start breathing normally again. After leaving town, I moved to a small coastal city a few hours away, far enough that the whispers couldn't follow me, but close enough that I could still visit my mother's grave when I needed to. The first few weeks were quiet, almost painfully so. I'd wake up and listen to the sound of waves outside my window, trying to get used to a life that didn't have wedding plans or family dinners. My days used to revolve around other people, my father, my fiancé, my students. But now everything revolved around healing. At first, I didn't know what healing even meant. I thought it was about forgetting. I tried to erase the memories, the sounds, the faces, but I soon realized healing isn't about forgetting. It's about understanding what broke you and learning how to live differently because of it. I went back to teaching part-time at a local elementary school, and for a few hours every day, I found peace in the laughter of children who still believed the world was kind. Their innocence reminded me that not everything in life is cruel. Every Sunday, I would sit by the ocean with a notebook and write. I wrote about everything: the lies, the love, the heartbreak, the silence. Writing became a way of putting my pain into words so it could stop living inside me. Some days, I'd cry halfway through a sentence. Other days, I'd find myself smiling without realizing it. I was learning that strength doesn't always come in loud, dramatic moments. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just waking up and deciding to keep going. About 2 months after the wedding, I received a letter from Noah. My hands shook as I opened it, unsure if I was ready to read his words. It was written in his careful handwriting, the same one I used to admire when he sketched blueprints. He said he had moved to Colorado to start a small architecture firm. He was trying to rebuild his life, just like I was. We were never meant to hurt each other, he wrote, but maybe we were meant to teach each other something. I learned that love can be pure even when it can't be forever. I hope someday you find a love that you don't have to let go of. I read that line over and over again until the words blurred through my tears. It didn't make the pain disappear, but it gave me peace. Our story wasn't meant to last, but it didn't have to end in bitterness. It was a chapter that would always hurt, but it was also the one that made me grow. My father tried to contact me a few times after I left. At first, I ignored his calls and letters. I needed time away from the weight of his guilt, but eventually, I answered one of his letters. He wrote that he had confessed everything to the local community, that people now knew the truth about his past. His reputation had suffered, but he said it felt like freedom. He ended his letter with, "You were right, Lena. Truth hurts less than lies. I hope one day you can forgive me, not for me, but for yourself." It took me a long time to understand what forgiveness really means. Forgiving him didn't mean what he did was okay. It meant I refused to let his choices keep me stuck in anger. I wrote him back one evening while the sun was setting over the ocean. I told him I didn't hate him anymore, but I couldn't go back to how things were. I told him that I was finally learning how to live for myself, not for anyone's approval or apology. Seasons changed. I planted flowers outside my cottage and watched them bloom in the spring. I joined a small community art group, and one of my paintings, a quiet landscape of the lake from my hometown, was displayed in a local gallery. For the first time in years, I felt proud of something again, not because it was perfect, but because it was mine. One evening, while sitting by the shore, I thought about everything that had happened, the lies, the heartbreak, the truth that tore my world apart. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I felt thankful for the strength it forced me to find, thankful for the lessons it taught me about love, honesty, and starting over. I realized that life doesn't always go the way we plan, but sometimes the detours lead us to the version of ourselves we were always meant to become. I looked out at the horizon, where the sun met the sea, and whispered, "Mom, I'm okay now." The wind carried my words softly, and in that moment, I believed it. A year later, I stood at my old town cemetery, placing fresh lilies on my mother's grave. My father was there too. We didn't say much, but we didn't need to. He looked older, more fragile, but his eyes were honest. "You look happy," he said quietly. "I'm getting there," I replied. He nodded. That's all I ever wanted. This time, I believed him. We walked out of the cemetery together, not as a perfect family, but as two people who had finally stopped running from the truth. That was the day I learned the real meaning of love. It isn't always romance or forever promises. Sometimes it's forgiveness. Sometimes it's letting go. And sometimes it's learning how to love yourself enough to begin again. If this story touched your heart, make sure to subscribe to my channel and comment below where you're watching from. I love reading your thoughts and stories. And remember, no matter how painful the truth may be, it will always lead you to something real.